People told me that it was going to be like going to 10 years of therapy in one weekend. I had at this time zero idea what any of that meant. And then all of a sudden I kind of started to see visions. And this is when Mother Aya, the spirit of Mother Ayahuasca, was talking to me. I wanted to raise my consciousness. I wanted to achieve what they call Christ consciousness. And I felt like Mother Aya was like, you're ready for this now. So I was shown.
Hello and welcome back to the Almost False podcast, where I interview regular people with incredible stories. Today's episode follows the journey of a woman who delved deep into the world of ayahuasca, experiencing it not just once, but 9 times. She shares in great detail what these experiences were and how they shaped her life in both positive and negative ways. But what makes her story truly remarkable is its unexpected ending, and I highly encourage you to stay until the end, not because it helps me, but because she delivers a powerful message and an important warning for anyone curious about or already involved with ayahuasca. With that, let's dive in and welcome today's guest, Rebecca Lemoyne.
Yeah, a big part of it was I'm in therapy every week and I hear myself repeating the same things over and over and over. And it was always around me not wanting to have the job that I had, but feeling stuck. And also issues with my husband because he was constantly drunk and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle that. And I realized that I was like afraid to speak up. And that became very apparent in my therapy sessions. And I also didn't know how to set boundaries because I, again, was afraid to speak up. So I just kind of just was always defeated and didn't know what to do. So I ended up making the decision to leave my husband, which is a whole long story that we won't get into, but it was very dramatic. And from that point, I just realized I needed healing. I wanted to heal. I felt broken and lonely, and I knew I needed to learn how to speak up for myself. I wanted to become a more strong, independent woman. I wanted to learn how to set boundaries. So like I had started to learn these things in therapy, but I just still felt broken. So I was told that these, new age practices would help me to heal myself. So that's what kind of brought me like looking for healing. That's why I went down that road.
Well, that's kind of the question I wanted to ask you next. So how and when did you hear about ayahuasca first, and why did it sound so appealing to you?
Yeah. So I had a couple of friends that had been doing it, fairly regularly, I don't know, a couple times a year type of thing. And they would talk about it as if it was this amazing, life-changing experience. And I was afraid of it because, I had done mushrooms. That was the only psychedelic that I had really gotten into. And I had done them a good bit. And that's kind of another thing I think that added to my desire to go deeper was the mushrooms kind of opened up this idea of like life is more. It's more than just this hamster wheel that I find myself on. It's more than just materialism. And then so ayahuasca I knew was also a psychedelic, and it was extremely intense. And I knew people told me that it was going to be like going to 10 years of therapy in one weekend. And I was like, yep, that's what I want. Sign me up, fast track to healing. So even though I knew it was, I was afraid of it for sure because I didn't know what to expect at all. I went into it pretty blind. I really did not enough research. I watched a handful of YouTube videos and I took my friend's suggestions and I listened to Joe Rogan's advice and I just jumped in, which again is kind of typical for me. I jump in and learn as I go type of thing.
So let's talk about your first ayahuasca trip. Where was it? How does it work? Can you run us through the whole process of, what happens from the time that you land at the airport in whatever country and the time that you get to the facility?
Yeah. So it was actually in the US. So I went to a place, it's actually shut down. It's no longer open, but it was called Soul Quest in Florida. And the way it was mostly outdoors. And it was not like, I don't know, it was very laid back, very kind of like simplistic, if you will. And there were structures, but most of them did not have, like they had like 3 walls and were open on one side. And because I thought I'd want to be in like a smaller group, I picked one of the semi-private ones. So there was about 20 people in the group that I was in. But overall at this retreat that weekend, there was 100 people. So it was a lot of people, but they broke it up into different areas. Again, the group that I was with was only like 20 people. That big round building had, I think, 50 people-ish in there. So they basically take us through this whole orientation of what to expect. And then they put on a video of, I can't even remember what they covered in the video, but it was just like a general orientation video. And they asked what medications we were on. There's certain medications that are contraindicated. Like if you're on a certain medication, you can't drink ayahuasca. SSRIs are not allowed. So, and a couple others I don't remember off the top of my head, but they did have a medical staff and a good procedure to make me feel like I was safe.
Well, at least that probably was reassuring to you because you were going in half blind. You said you had done some research, so maybe you already knew that about the place. I'm kind of wondering, like, who is there during the ceremony aside from the people that are with you in the group? You said you were in a semi-private, so around 20. Like, aside from these people, who was also present?
So there were a good amount of facilitators. I honestly don't remember how many total, but like in each room there was at least two. And then they had a ton of volunteers. And like the volunteers are there to they can bring you water, they can bring you blankets, they can help clean up if a mess is made, like, because there's always vomiting. That's very common. And it does make you feel extremely comfortable because I did feel very taken care of. Like I felt like I could just lay there and I didn't have to worry about anything. If I needed something, I could raise my hand and they would bring it to me.
Well, you mentioned the ceremony a little bit and the drinking. So let's get to the ceremony part. Can you run us through everything that happens during the ceremony? How does that work?
Sure, yeah. So before you sit and drink, everyone gets cleansed, if you will. They take sage and brush everyone with sage, like sage smoke, which honestly smelled awful for me. Some people loved it, and I don't know why. I just did not like the smell of sage. And they would like blow smoke, so they'd be like burning it, and they would take a feather and like waft you with the smoke. And then they would use Florida water, and you can like rinse your hands and maybe put it on your face. And I had at this time zero idea what any of that meant. It all does have deep spiritual meaning as far as trying to like cleanse you spiritually and prepare you to go into the spiritual realm. I didn't know that going in at all. And then the facilitators take and bless the medicine. So they pour it into these little shot glasses that those are the ones that we're going to be drinking from. And like they basically blow this smoke and say a prayer over the medicine before they serve it. And then you get in line and you tell them how much you want. And as a first time person, they always suggest that you do 1 tablespoon or less. If you're not comfortable with a full tablespoon, that's fine. But they don't allow you to take, at this place anyway, they didn't allow you to take more than 1 tablespoon as your first serving.
Okay. That's one thing that I'm also curious about. What is the drink? Like, what is ayahuasca? Um, it just sounds like a weird mixture, like a witch would make, like in the movies. Like that's kind of what it sounds like to me, but I don't know what it is. Do you have an idea of what's in the whatever the glass?
What I know about it is that it is made from the ayahuasca root, which is just the name of a root found in the Amazon, and a chacuna leaf. So it's 2 different plants that are mixed together, and they brew it like a tea. And I don't know what else goes in there. I don't know, the ratio or anything like that, but they brew it like a tea, and it's very thick consistency and very dark, like almost black. It even might be black. It's like mud, but like really, really dark and thick. And what I do know is that the active ingredient in it is DMT. But the way that it gets digested, it lasts much longer than just smoking DMT. So it's similar, but it stays in your system longer. So therefore, you're like kind of in the spiritual realm for a longer period of time.
Okay, so they give you this drink that has DMT in it. What happened after you drank it?
So it took about like 45 minutes for it to like have any effect. So I was basically just kind of sitting there listening to music. They tell you not to say anything, to, just kind of stay inward. And then all of a sudden I kind of started to see visions. It kind of came on slow, but then it was like, whoa. So what I first started seeing it's kind of hard to explain, but everything looked like it was just like plastic, but it was just like everywhere and overwhelming. And I was kind of like in that space for a while, and I didn't want to be in it, and I couldn't get out. And then eventually that just kind of faded away, and I became very aware, and I was like, wait, what were the rules again? Am I allowed to write down? Because one of the men said that you could journal while you were doing it, and I love to journal. And I was just like, wait, should I though? Is that going to pull me out of this? And should I get up? Should I not get up? And so I'm thinking way too much about all the things that they said in the orientation instead of like relaxing into the experience. But I was very aware. It felt like everyone was staring at me, which is kind of common for me at that time. I was always so worried about what everyone else thought of me. So I basically went through in and out of these visions and this like fear of what everyone was thinking of me and this uncomfortable period for I don't know how long. It was a while. And then they ring this gong for what they call the boosters. So they said if you can talk and walk, then you can go get a booster if you want, which means that you can get more medicine. Like you can get another shot glass of this of ayahuasca. So at that time I felt very out of it, but I also could talk and walk. And I'm like, okay, I can talk and walk. So I said to the facilitator, I said, should I bring my bucket? And he goes, if you feel so inclined. And I said, okay. So I grabbed my bucket and I felt like fine, except a little bit like loopy. So I walk outside of the structure because I remember I said it was like a 3-wall thing. So I just go outside. And as I stepped outside, I felt this like immense feeling that everyone, even more so, was looking at me, and I just got in line and I felt like unbelievably uncomfortable. And as I'm in line, all of the sudden a purge came. And that's what they call it when you throw up, is they call it a purge. And I just knelt down and started throwing up in my bucket. And as I was purging, what I felt coming out of me, like what I had in my mind was I'm getting rid of the care of what everyone thinks of me. And I like just was throwing up and crying and like just letting it all out for like 15 minutes. And I stood up from there just feeling lighter than air. Like just this weight was lifted off of me. And I no longer cared that if everyone was looking at me, I didn't care anymore. And I ended up going up and asking for the booster. And at that point, the line had gone away. And they were like, are you feeling the medicine? And I said, yeah, for sure. I was like, I just had a moment. And they were like, well, maybe we'll just give you a tiny booster, like a little itty bitty one. So they gave me like a quarter tablespoon. And I went back to my mat and I drank that. And then it continued on and got so much different after that because I feel like all of the discomfort was gone and I surrendered. That's what they tell you to do, is surrender to the medicine. And then I went on a journey, like a journey. And this is when Mother Aya, the spirit of Mother Ayahuasca, was talking to me. And she basically just told me so much. And I was just writing everything down in my journal. And it was everything I wanted to hear. And it was just so beautiful. At that point, I had never felt like a love like that. It was just so pure. And then I was shown things about the spiritual world. And what I was shown was this huge web of energy. And she was telling me that everything and everyone and every plant, every planet, every universe is connected by this huge web of energy. And we feed it with our love. So we try, and she was showing me how we have all these bad batteries with like money and pride and greed. And we try to like feed and make our lives better with these things, but all they're really doing is draining us. And all we need to do is love each other. And then this web of energy could be so much stronger. That's just such a short version. There was so much that she told me. And, yeah, she just verified a lot of the life decisions I was making at the time. And it was long. We sat down and drank the first cup at like, I think 5 o'clock ish. It was about at sundown in February. And then I was going on this journey until 4 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know how you felt, but to me, like it just makes me feel so uncomfortable because the reason why you throw up is because that's poison. Like that's why you throw it up, because you literally drink poison. And so that first thing is like, well, that's quite weird. But I'm wondering about the Mother Aya spirit that you talk about. How was the interaction? Because you said that she was talking to you. Could you see something? Could you hear something? How did it work?
It was like ideas being dropped in my head. Um, and I didn't necessarily see her, but I had an image of what she looked like. And she was just like gorgeous, just a gorgeous woman. And she could like morph into the planet. She was like half earth, half human. And she was guiding me. She was just like, I'm here for you. And then to go back to that tiny little bit that I had, that quarter tablespoon, she told me, she said, we're not going to purge this. I'm going to let you keep that. And that's going to be my way of staying with you and guiding you for the journey that you're going on. Cause I was, getting ready to move into my RV and live remotely and travel around the US. And she was just giving me all this confidence that she was going to be guiding me and she was going to be with me.
Okay. So this spirit that you never knew anything about was like,
Hmm.
actually, I'm staying. You don't have a choice. You're stuck with me, which could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on this kind of spirit, right? I don't know. I don't know if I want a spirit just following me like that if I don't know
Yeah.
what kind of spirit is in there. But you mentioned that I think a few months before, or maybe like something like that, you were an atheist, but you had come to believe that there was something more. How did your worldview change after this experience?
It was interesting because I was just like for the first time open to the idea of there's something. And as that happened, I things just got brighter in a sense. Like the colors were brighter and I like looked up at the sky and was just like, wow, like look how beautiful the clouds are. Like the little things were just so beautiful. And I started to see numbers like that were repeating, and the number 22 would come up constantly. And that I believed was just God showing me, like, keep going, you're on the right path. Every time that number came up, I was like, okay, I see you. So for the first time, I just believed that I was being guided. And then now I felt like I had Mother Aya too. Like I felt like spiritually I was being guided and led. And I kept meeting people that were so amazing and just having the most amazing experiences. And it just felt like it was beyond me. Like there was something bigger guiding me.
Okay, so that Mother Aya spirit, I wonder if we're gonna see her, but I'm gonna ask about the next experiences because you did 3 trips,
Hmm.
and you said you drank 3 times the first time, and so I think it was the same thing for the next
Yes.
2 ayahuasca trips. How was it? Did you interact with her again? What were your experiences like on the next 2 trips?
Yeah, I would say that weekend, and that story was only the first night of the first weekend. There was a lot more too that happened, but that first weekend, she was with me more prominently than in the other 2 weekends. The second weekend, there's really not too much to report on there, except it was more dark. It wasn't super dark, but it was just more like I felt stuck the whole time, and it was frustrating. Like I felt like I couldn't like get to where I wanted to go. But I'll just talk more about the third weekend. At that time, I was really deep into doing all kinds of different New Age practices because it was about 2 years in at that point of me going deep into New Age stuff. Just I wanted to raise my consciousness. I wanted to achieve what they call Christ consciousness, and I was doing all kinds of practices to try to reach that. And I felt like Mother Aya was like showing me more to try to like say, yes, you're ready for this now. Like you're ready to kind of move on to this next level of understanding. And so I was shown, again, going back to how we feed this web of energy, I was shown that even on like a deeper level of how like we're meant to feel everything really, really deeply. That's why there's so much pain and anguish and fear and death and all of that stuff, is that we're meant to feel all of that. And then as we sit in that feeling, we can work through it and then let it go. And when we let it go, I was shown that we give it back to Mother Earth, and she takes all of our pain and all of our sorrow and she takes it and nurtures it back into life, back into the plants and everything that grows from the earth and the water. And then the more that we do that, the more that we give our pain to her, we are cleansed, and then we become pure love, and then we become vessels that can feed that pure love to source, which for me source was like above everything, above all the universes, everything was this huge source of energy. And that's what I believed that we fed into. And the more we feed love into that, the more we're powering everything and everyone.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to tell you about our extra content on Locals. It's where you can hear the beginning of our conversations, learn the practical applications of the testimonies, and get hours worth of other bonus content. All of that, plus the regular episodes without any ads. It's free to join, so why don't you come check it out by going to almostfalse.locals.com by downloading the Locals app. The links are in the description. Now let's get back to the story. You mentioned some New Age practices.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know how that developed after the first experience, because I think that was a catalyst for you to get into the practices. How
Yeah.
did that develop over time and like the amount? And also, Mother Aya had promised you that she was going to be there to heal you. What happened with the healing that she was promising?
Yeah. So as I left that first weekend, I left feeling like an angel. And I wanted, like, there's what they call this pink cloud that you're in when you leave these retreats. and you feel amazing, but then you get back to normal life and that doesn't stay. It doesn't stick around. So that's why they say these integration calls help, and doing all these practices keep you in this state of joy, really. So I picked up little by little, but I started to do yoga every day. And I did that because I wanted to move my body. I didn't really understand it as a spiritual practice at first. I thought it was more just the stretching and exercise, but that was something that like everyone was talking about. So I just started to pick that up, and I did yoga every day in my RV, which was kind of funny because I had like just enough space to set my yoga mat up. And then I started to attempt to meditate. In the beginning, it was like pathetic because I could barely sit for 10 minutes, and then I built up more and more and more and more to the point where I was meditating for at least an hour every morning, and then an hour at night. And then I picked up breath work. So again, this is like, maybe 1 month I pick up one thing, the next month I pick the next thing up, but it was like I added on. I never took anything away. So then now I'm doing yoga, I'm doing breath work, I'm doing meditation, and each one of these things take a good amount of time. So I'm up to like 3+ hours now of every single morning doing these practices. And then I was reading A Course in Miracles. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a book that they say was channeled. And this woman said that it was Jesus speaking to her, and she wrote down what he said. And it's basically saying that he was correcting some things that the Bible got wrong. And there's a lot of things in it that feel really good and are aligned with the Bible. And then there's a lot of things that aren't, where, for example, it says basically that evil is not real and that sin is not real and that people can't sin. We can't go against God's will. But it basically is they call it a course because it's a 365-day basically workbook where you read a portion and then you do an exercise every day, which is a lot of times it's like repeating a statement to yourself or doing a certain prayer. So that was one of the practices that I was doing. So at the end of the day, it ended up being 5 hours of practices that I was doing every single morning to try to raise my consciousness. And my goal was I wanted to communicate with the spiritual realm. Like I wanted to hear from spirits like Mother Ayahuasca without being on ayahuasca, without taking psychedelics. I wanted to be able to have this like connection to the spiritual realm.
That sounds like a lot. 5 hours every morning. That's
Yeah.
sleep that you have to sacrifice in order to be able to do that. There's one thing that you talked about, and it just kind of lit up something in my mind. Because you said that there's this pink cloud after the ayahuasca retreat that everyone kind of experiences, or most people experience. But you say it doesn't go away, and then you need to do these practices in order to keep it or to get it again. It sounds like an addiction. Like that's what meth or heroin or like any kind of hard drug would do, right? You feel amazing, but then it goes away, and then you have to take it again, or take something else. That's what it sounds like to me. It doesn't sound like this transformative experience that changed you from the inside, although there does seem to be things that changed in you at the same time. But you were doing that to try to raise your consciousness, which is a different goal than what you had in the beginning. In the beginning, you wanted to heal.
Yes.
Did that work, essentially? That's what I'm asking, because I know you were doing it, but did you see any results in what you were trying to achieve?
There was so much going on at the same time that it's so hard to say, because like I was stepping into this new life where again I moved into an RV and I left my husband and I even left my job too. So I was like taking all these big steps to like just rid myself of my old life, and then stepping into all these new age practices all at the same time. So what I was seeking was to be able to, be a stronger person and be able to use my voice and set boundaries and all of that. Like, I do feel like I did grow in some areas, in that regard. But as far as like, I was still stressed out all the time. I still had anxiety. I was never like, I don't know. I was looking for peace, I think, at the end of the day, and I didn't find that. I found more work and more stress and more like I just was always looking again, the same way I was in the corporate world, always looking for the next step. It was just like that in New Age. I was looking for the next level of consciousness, the next level of healing. And it was like there was never a moment where I was like, that's it, I'm healed. I'm good. It was like I was constantly looking for more. And there was still, those moments again of anxiety and stress and feeling lonely and feeling confused and still not sure if I made the right choice in leaving my husband and like all this confusion. So yeah, did I really find what I was looking for? No.
You mentioned Jesus earlier, so I want to get back to that because you said you had this friend, or at least someone that you met, that said that she met the real Jesus and he contradicted everything that Jesus said, which is an interesting thing. Sounds a little bit weird, but what was your view of Jesus at that point in your life?
So it's really interesting because I kept asking about Jesus. So I knew that like Jesus wasn't really talked about very much in these circles, except for again A Course in Miracles that said it was channeled by Jesus. When you did ask about Jesus, in when I did anyway, in these New Age circles, they would tell me that he was an ascended master. A lot of these people believe that he was off learning how to meditate and learning how to raise his consciousness, and he achieved Christ consciousness. So Jesus to me was just another ascended master. He was one of many. He was amazing, but that never really like scratched the itch for me. I was like, okay, that's cool, but like Christians don't believe that. Like they believe in something else. What do they believe? But it never made sense to me why all of my Christian friends, like people that I met along the way who were Christian, were so certain that like they knew their God and that they could communicate with their God, and they were so confident that Jesus was the way. And I'm just like, man, that's awesome that they're so confident and so sure, because no one in the new age is sure. We're all just like, we're not sure what happens after we die, but we're going to try our best to raise our consciousness to give ourselves the best chance at enlightenment. But what is enlightenment? Like it was so vague, whereas Christians were just so certain. And it always kind of bothered me.
Well, I wanted to ask about Christians because you were traveling in the RV, and I wonder if you met Christians and did they try to convince you away from what you believed about Jesus?
Yeah, there were several Christians that I met along the way. There was a couple I met in Wyoming. Actually, one couple in Wyoming and one in Colorado. But the couple in Colorado started a buffalo ranch, and I kind of just shared with them. We kind of had a really good conversation about life, and I asked them, why they decided to become buffalo ranchers, and their story was crazy. Like they had come from Indiana, and they had normal upbringing. He had a corporate job, she was just like a stay-at-home mom, and then they got a calling from God to become buffalo ranchers. And they tell me the story on how this happened. And I'm just like, wow. And again, at this point, I had this feeling like I was being guided by God. I was seeing the number 22 everywhere. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm getting a calling from God too. God's leading me too. So we totally like aligned and had this amazing conversation. And then at the end of the conversation, they tell me, they're like, yeah, and the way we know that we're on God's path is we always see the number 22. And I was just like, what? And then I start crying because I'm just like, yes, like God led me here. Um, and it turns out that I didn't know this from that conversation specifically, but they are Christians. So they're not just following some God, they're following Christianity. And the man ended up writing me a blessing because he writes blessings. And he said, a blessing for Rebecca. I wish I had it right now to show you, but it was so beautiful. And I brought it with me. And it's actually still in my RV right now. And it was just so kind. But they didn't try to convince me of anything. They were just happy that, we shared stories, and they feel like we came in contact for a reason. And we both left just feeling joyful to have met each other and shared stories with each other. That was just one example. But then I met a woman named Mercy, and same, she was very open to hearing my story. And she was out front in the fact that she's a Christian. And she asked me if I followed Jesus. And I said, well, no, not really. I said, I follow God. I believe that I'm being led by God. But, Jesus, I'm not like sure about. And she's just like, okay. And she didn't force anything. And then a few months after that, we had exchanged numbers and we hung out that night. And then a few months after that, she messaged me and she said, hey, where in the world is my friend Rebecca? And, I just told her where I was. And she's like, well, if you're looking to binge watch something, my family and I love The Chosen. So I end up, clicking on the first episode, and I'm like, oh, it's about Jesus. I didn't even know, that it was about Jesus. And I was like, well, I've been curious about him. I might as well watch this and take her suggestion. And I ended up binge watching the series, loved it because it told me who Jesus was and who he really was, like his true story, all about why he came here. And what really struck me in watching The Chosen was the way that Jesus was like anti-religion, and he was telling the Pharisees, like, no, you don't have to do it like that. This is not the way. And I ended up texting that to Mercy and saying, I binge watched it. I loved it. And it's so interesting because I've always been anti-Christianity because I'm anti-religion, like the rules and regulations. And I was like, it sounds like Jesus felt the same way. And I'm kind of laughing about it. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, well, now it's making me want to read the Bible. And then she suggested that I do this thing called 3 in 1, which is a podcast where you read 3 chapters of the Old Testament and 1 chapter of the New every day. And then there's a short 15-minute or less podcast episode where a pastor talks about what you just read. So it's a good way, for me, it was a good structured way to work my way through the Bible. Now, she suggested this, I think, in the month of January, and I didn't start it until May. So she sent me the suggestion, but I didn't take it right away. But in May of 2023, I actually started to do that and started to read the Bible.
I think you might have answered my next question, but I'm curious because I think you can definitely clarify some of these things. You believe that Jesus was an ascended master, just like, everyone else. And I'm curious, maybe it was The Chosen, maybe it was something else. What was the first thing that made you doubt that was accurate?
Yeah, I think it was The Chosen. It was The Chosen. And then it was also my friend Maria, who I talked to regularly as I was traveling. I would call her when I was on my long rides and share with her all this spiritual stuff that I was going through. And she would always tell me that Jesus is the way. And Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father but through him. And it was just like, it kind of like I said before, it ate at my heart a little bit that like she was so sure. And I'm just like, why? Like, why is she so sure? Like, there's other ways, there's other things. She doesn't even care to explore them. She's never drank ayahuasca. She's never done these meditations that I'm doing. Like, how could she possibly know that for certain it's Jesus? And it would make me angry. And then at one point, it was November of 23. So after I had started reading the Bible, it was on Thanksgiving. I remember she told me I was following Satan. And I got really upset. And I honestly couldn't explain why it upset me so much. I was like, if I just don't believe her, why am I so upset by it? I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing is right. I just hated like that she was saying that to me. And I guess it was like her conviction and her certainty. And then also that I had watched The Chosen and I had an idea of who Jesus really was, if it was true. I wasn't sure if I believed any of it. But I just kind of started to think like, I don't know, maybe Maria has something, but I just don't know. I just didn't know. And it was frustrating.
You had started like doubting your prior beliefs though. And how did that develop over time? Did you go back to what you believed, that Jesus was an ascended master, or did you shift more towards what your friend Maria was saying? Like, how did that work in the next year or so?
Honestly, like I was really just shutting down what Maria told me. And even after watching The Chosen and starting to read the Bible, I just didn't believe it. And I just kept kind of digging in harder to my new age stuff. So while I had these like, little bit of doubts, I more so was like diving into what I was doing and getting deeper and deeper to wanting to raise my consciousness, because what I experienced on ayahuasca was so real, and nothing could take that away from me. So I just wanted to get deeper into that. And again, I wanted to figure out how to get to that place of spirituality without taking ayahuasca or without taking mushrooms. So I started to get really deep into meditation, because I thought, meditation, if I truly cleanse myself and clear myself, that's how I can get to this state of consciousness that I'm looking for. So I just got deeper into that. So even though I had these lingering things hanging around in my head, I didn't really pay much attention to them. And I just focused in on my goal of raising my consciousness.
What I find interesting is that most people that believe in religion or spirituality, well, I don't know if most, but a lot of people believe it based on theory. And you had experiences. So when we have experiences, they weigh more than theory typically. and you had your friend telling you who Jesus was. Then you had this experience that was telling you that Jesus was a different person. Um, how did you eventually come to the conclusion that you have today, given what I've already said?
So, like I said, I was diving deep into meditation and I found an opportunity to go on a 10-day silent meditation retreat. So, no talking, no technology, no computers, no journaling, no reading, just complete silence. And it was a course in Vipassana meditation. So I decided to do that. And as I'm there, I was getting really into it. I was loving learning the style of meditation. I was really feeling like I was emptying myself, and I started to feel like my whole body vibrating. Felt like I was achieving what I wanted to achieve while there. Then it was about the seventh night there, so pretty deep into it. So I'm like pretty like empty. Like there's no distractions, if you will. There's no, like, I haven't been on my phone in 7 days. I hadn't heard, there'd been no talking. I mean, there was instruction when it came to the meditation, but there was no communication. Like I hadn't said a word in 7 days, which is wild. So now I'm sleeping. It was in the middle of the night during this meditation retreat, and I had a profound dream, like the most real dream I've ever had. And I can still, when I tell the dream, I still feel like I'm in it. And so what happened in this dream was I was driving and I heard a voice that said, "Get out of your car and stop traffic." And I knew immediately that it was God talking to me. So I just listened. And I was on like a 4-lane highway and there was cars everywhere. So I'm scared, but I just listen and I'm like, okay, okay. So I slow the car down and I just open the door and get out in the middle of this highway. And there's, again, cars whizzing by and it's just me. And I just kind of like got in the middle of the street and started putting my arms out from side to side, just like stop, 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 stop. And the cars start stopping one by one. Like, you know how like when one car stops, then the one next to it stops and they all saw me and the whole 4-lane highway is now stopped. And I'm out there now just like, what am I doing? Like, what do I do next? And nothing, I hear nothing. So then the cops show up because I've caused this huge traffic jam. And the police are like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I heard from God and he told me to stop traffic." And they're like, "Get out of the street, you crazy lady. Like, get over here." So they pull me into the cop car and they take me down to the station. And overhearing their conversations, I hear that there was just this huge backup of traffic and it caused accidents. And there was like this chain of events that happened that I can't remember all the details of, but there was a chain of events that a woman's life was saved because I had stopped traffic. And I knew that. And now I hear the cops on the phone with a 911 dispatcher. And this dispatcher had taken like a bunch of these calls from the accidents and stuff that had happened. And the cops say to the guy, the dispatcher, they're like, "Yeah, this crazy lady says she heard from God and he told her to stop traffic." And the guy goes, the dispatcher says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. Don't do anything to her. She's telling you the truth. I heard from God too. And he told me to tell her and to tell everyone that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior." And in that moment, the dispatcher became a believer because he wasn't one before. But in confirming that, like, wait a minute, God did talk to me because she heard from God too. And this is what he told me to give her this message, you know? So in that moment, he became a believer. And then I woke up from the dream. And I'm still at this meditation retreat. I can't talk about it. I can't write it down. I'm a journaler. I couldn't write it down. I just sat with it and I'm just like, and immediately I focused on the part that I couldn't remember. I was like, wait a minute, how was this woman's life saved? What happened again? How do I don't remember those details. And then I just like got kind of hyper focused on that. And then the next day was just like, forget it. That was nothing. And I just wrote it off as a dream. And I was just like, I just moved on. And I finished out the meditation retreat, went home and told everyone how great Vipassana meditation is. And I continued to meditate in that style for an hour in the morning, an hour at night, every day.
So you had this profound dream, but like you discounted it because it didn't fit with everything else that you believe. And it's also a dream. Dreams can be weird sometimes. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
But the reason why you talk about it is because it was significant, I imagine. So what ended up happening with that dream?
So this was in the dream. I had the dream in January of 2024. So about a year ago. And the month after, so it was February of 2024, I had plans to go visit Maria. So I went to go see her and we went to lunch. And I was kind of anxious about going to see her because I knew she was like not in agreement with all the things I was doing. And I was fresh off of my last ayahuasca journey. I'm fresh off of this meditation retreat. She had begged me not to go to this meditation retreat because it's a Hindu style of meditation. And once she saw that, she was like, please don't go. She's like, I know you're gonna, but please don't. So I was really like uncomfortable going to visit her, but I also still wanted to see her. So I went. And again, we're at lunch and it pops in my head to tell her about this dream. I'm like, oh, yeah, I had a dream about Jesus. Let me tell you about it. So I tell her the dream, just like I just told you. And as I'm telling her the part where I said, Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior, I was crying my eyes out. I was like just hysterically crying. And I'm just like, I looked at her and I go, it's true, isn't it? And she was like, hmm? And I was like, but no, it can't be. It can't be. I was like, I can't, no. And I was still resisted, even though like in that moment, I was just overwhelmed with emotion, overwhelmed with like, whoa, wait, I got a message from God. Like, I can't just ignore that, you know? And I just kind of started to think for the very first time, what if? Like, what if it's Jesus? What if Maria's been right this whole time? What if God gave me that message that Jesus is my Lord and Savior? I can't just ignore this. What if everything else I've been doing has been lies? And it just, from that moment on, it was like a snowball. It took like a couple of weeks for it to like really settle in because I was still resistant. But I just kind of started to really dive in and I heard the verse for the very first time that Satan masquerades as an angel of light. And that blew my mind. And I couldn't believe, because first of all, before this, I didn't even believe in Satan. I didn't believe in evil. You know, I thought everyone was inherently good and that we all just, you know, lost our way and we all just need healing. So to think that there was a possibility that everything I was doing was deception and it was all, when Maria said I was following Satan, that she was right, you know, it just shook me. And it took me a little bit to really like believe that. But I went through this process and ended up surrendering my life to Jesus and just saying, okay, I believe it's you and show me the way. And I was just flooded with the truth. I was shown all of the deception for what it really is. I was shown that evil is real. And I could not put down the Bible. I was devouring, like I was already reading it, like I told you, but now I was just like diving in, like digging into it, like highlighting and flipping the pages and just seeing this because I was having this rebirth experience. So as the Bible's talking about it, I was like, yes, like this is exactly what I'm feeling. Yeah, and then that I was reborn. I was reborn.
It's incredible. And I mentioned something earlier that I want to touch back on because I said that most of the time people believe in theories, but a lot of people that do psychedelics, especially ayahuasca is one of the stronger ones, at least that I'm aware of, because it has DMT. They have experiences, and experiences weigh a lot. And they were weighing a lot for you as well, because we talked about how for a long time people were telling you about Jesus, and you're like, no, I've experienced this. I know that this is real. How did the belief about the Bible and about who Jesus is in the Bible, how did that overpower the experiences that you had previously?
So it's really hard to explain because I think part of it is supernatural. Because when I surrendered to Jesus and said, okay, I believe you, like he showed me that all of those experiences, it's not that they were fake. I did have spiritual experiences. I was communicating with spirits. I was visiting the spiritual realm, but I now understood that I was doing that illegally. I didn't even know Jesus. I didn't have any idea who he was. I was completely blank and blind. I was this open, like a puppet. I was just like the perfect puppet for the enemy to put whatever he wanted into my mind. I went into this ayahuasca just saying, okay, show me, because I was empty. I didn't know anything. So how perfect is that for the enemy to just be able to show me that I have all the power and I can heal myself? I started to believe that I was the God of my own world. I was a co-creator with Source, and I was creating everything as I went. And I just realized from reading the words of God, from reading the Bible, that those were lies and I was being deceived, and that Satan masquerades as an angel of light. So even though it felt so good and it felt like it was love, it was deception. And the more I read the Bible and read it to be true and read it to be the word of God and opened up my mind to like, wait a minute, this is the truth, then it showed me that everything else was a clear lie and it was clear deception and it was clearly a counterfeit of the real thing. And then I felt this peace and just confidence and clarity. And it was like everything I had been seeking was right there in Jesus. And every answer I ever wanted was in the Bible. And I just discounted it the whole time and I rejected it. And it started to become so clear to me why, because being raised in this world, without knowing Jesus, without ever really understanding the Bible, without having a clear guidance as a child, I let the world control my thoughts. All I cared about was what everyone else thought of me. And the world tells you that, don't follow Jesus. That's weird. Your Christians are weird. And so to me, I wanted nothing to do with Jesus or Christianity. It kind of like took me back when people talked about Jesus. I'm like, oh, that's weird. And that's what happens when you're raised in this world, because that's exactly what the enemy wants.
There's one thing that I find curious, and I noticed it earlier, I just didn't mention it, because when you went on the first trip, you said that the Spirit told you everything that you wanted to hear.
Mm.
That typically is not a good sign. The friends that you have to tell you everything that you want to hear are usually not the great friends. And the great
Yeah.
friends tell you what you need to hear.
Yeah.
And it didn't sound like that, but that's exactly what, the character of Satan in the Bible, that's what he does. He tells you
Yeah.
what you want to hear and he gives you what you want all the time. And so it does correlate with your experience and understanding that Satan masquerades as an angel of light kind of just put everything together. So yeah, I just found that interesting. But you mentioned about your life having tons of New Age practices, 5 hours a day, which to me is insane. And you said that you were stressed and you were looking for peace. How did that change? How did your life change after you surrendered your life to Jesus?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's still developing. But it's just, I realize that I don't have to do anything, that Jesus did the work for us. Like he died on the cross to pay for our sins and to wipe us clean. And so I'm not earning a spot, I'm not trying to work my way to the next level. It's in an instant. The moment that I gave my life to Jesus, I was forgiven. And did I go through a repentance process where like I kind of had to go through everything that I had done? And I got down on my knees and I cried, realizing like what I had done, how I had just gone against our God. And I know that, he forgives me and I was forgiven in an instant. I know that, but I still felt like just so awful. It's just that process of just kind of realizing what I had done. And I think that at his feet, I just sat and said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So it's just knowing, like, I don't have any more questions about what's going to happen after I die, or, what I have to do, what my purpose is. It is so easy and so clear. Every morning, all I have to remember is follow Jesus. That's it. It's so simple. And I do take time to pray and sit with him and be in his presence, because I enjoy that. I want to be in his presence and I want to read the Bible. And the more that I read the Bible, the more that I get deeper and understand who he is. But it's not because I'm earning anything or trying to achieve anything. It's already done. I just want to draw closer to him every day because I love my Father, my Heavenly Father. And I'm just so grateful to now be able to know him, and to know the coolest thing for me is to know that we can have a personal relationship with him. It's not, I had no idea. Like, I didn't know what this was, I had no clue. And now it's just so beautiful that because of what Jesus did, like when he died on that cross, the veil was torn, and it allows us to now have this open communication with God. And when you take advantage of that, the weight just gets lifted more and more and more every day. Do I still have moments where I get anxious and get worried and I let things bog me down? I do, but I remember very quickly that I have to pray and I have to give it to Jesus, and he doesn't want me to feel this way. And, he says, come to me all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And he truly does. And when I go through that process and I say, I'm catching myself, Lord, I'm trying to carry too much. I'm sorry. I give it to you. It supernaturally lightens my load. I don't know how to explain that any other way. It's just this beautiful certainty that I have now that I've never had before.
Yeah, that's what actually I was going to say, because you started in the corporate world and you had this weight on your shoulder to get to the next dollar, and these expectations that you probably were putting on yourself. And then you got purged from that, but then you gained the same thing in the new age, and that weight of
Yeah.
needing to do more and more and more. And it seemed like once you surrendered that to Jesus, that weight was finally lifted, which it kind of seemed like that's what you were seeking in the first place before getting into the new age and getting caught into all these other things. So it seemed like actually Jesus is what brought you what you were looking for in the beginning. And your story is amazing. I find that there's such a joy in you just talking to you, and I find that very beautiful. And I think people at home can probably see that, especially if they're watching the video. But I'm sure it probably transpires in the audio too. I want to give you an opportunity to speak to people that are interested or have done ayahuasca. It's a major thing now. You said, Joe Rogan talks about it all the time. It's becoming very popular, and a lot of people have done it, but there's a lot of people that are also interested in doing that. With the experience that you have, what would you say to these people?
Yeah. First of all, I understand the desire. I completely understand the desire to want to heal yourself, to want to experience the spiritual realm the way that, it's talked about as being this higher level of intelligence and wanting to know more about the spiritual realm. Like, I understand the draw to that. But I would say is that the reason that you have that desire to want to do these spiritual practices and want to go so deep into the spiritual realm, especially with ayahuasca, is because we are all innately drawn to wanting a relationship with God. We were created to have a relationship with our creator, with the one true God. So that is why you have this deep desire in you, is because there's this hole inside of you that you want to fill, and only Jesus can fill it. Going to ayahuasca, what it's going to do is fill you with things that you want to hear, and maybe answer a few questions, and you might get true healing from it. I have seen people that get healing, but it's not going to give you the true answers that you're looking for. And what we're seeking, some people find this so hard to hear, but what we are all seeking is Jesus. He is the answer. He is the way, the truth, and the life. So if you decide, no, I don't want to trust Jesus, I'm going to go off on my own and try this ayahuasca thing, it's going to take you down a deep, dark path, and it's going to just be more and more work. It's going to put everything on you, that you can heal yourself, that you have everything within you, and it's going to direct you away from the truth, which is Jesus. So I would recommend not going there. Although, yes, I believe it did open me up to the spiritual realm. And I think there's a reason that my path went the way that it did. But I think it's so dangerous, because when you open yourself up to the spiritual realm, these evil forces that are there can tell you whatever they want to tell you. So yeah, I think it's dangerous. I would recommend staying away from it and turning to prayer. Just talk to Jesus. Talk to him like he's your best friend and he's standing right next to you. Even tell him that I don't understand any of this. How can I possibly believe you? I need to have some kind of show me something. Give me an experience. And I can't guarantee he's going to answer that prayer, but just acknowledge that he's there and that he's listening, because he is. And the more you talk to him and the more you do open up and pray to him, the more that he'll become real in your life. He will become real in your life.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Almost False podcast. I'm sure that a lot of you will have questions after hearing this. So if you'd like to contact Rebecca, you can find all of our information on our website. The link is also in the description, as always. And a huge thank you to all of our supporters on Locals. They help me keep this show going. And if you'd like to do that too, I would be incredibly grateful. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay blessed.